Welcome to this journey through one of the most unsettling cases ever recorded in Georgia's history. Before we begin, I invite you to comment where you are watching from and the exact time you are listening to this story. It's always interesting to know how far these old tales travel and at what hours of the day or night they reach you. The year was 1847 when the Caldwell estate stood proudly among the wide cotton fields of Wilks County, Georgia. The large White House with its tall columns and long porch was seen as the pride of the region, sitting high on a gentle hill that looked over nearly 800 acres of farmland. The Caldwell name carried influence in local society, not only because of their great wealth, but also because of the twin daughters who had become the subject of whispered talk across the county. Elizabeth and Catherine Caldwell, identical in every way down to a small birthmark above their right eyebrows, turned 22 that spring, an age when most young women of their class were already married and mothers. Few outside the plantation knew that behind the calm and graceful image of Southern respectability, a quiet storm was forming that would eventually destroy the Caldwell family's proud legacy. According to county records uncovered during a courthouse renovation in 1952, the twins' mother had died while giving birth to them, leaving their father, Thomas Caldwell, to raise them alone. Thomas never remarried and devoted his life to his daughters and his growing cotton business. The first sign that something strange was happening at the Caldwell plantation came in a letter written by the family's longtime housekeeper, Margaret Sullivan, to her sister in Savannah. The letter, dated April 8, 1847, mentioned that the young ladies had begun spending an unusual amount of time in the quarters, something their father seemed oddly unconcerned about. That letter would later be discovered hidden inside a family Bible, preserved there for more than a century. The quarters Margaret referred to were the slave quarters, a small group of wooden cabins about half a mile from the main house, behind a cluster of oak trees that kept them out of sight. The Caldwell estate kept around 70 enslaved people, a smaller number than some nearby plantations, but still enough to manage the fields and household. Among those enslaved workers were two men who would become central to the dark events that followed. According to plantation records kept in the Georgia Historical Society archives, they were listed only as Samuel and Elijah. Both were purchased in 1842 from a South Carolina plantation that had fallen into financial trouble. What made them unusual, based on accounts gathered years later by local historian William Hartwell, was that both could read and write. They had learned secretly from their former owner's children, a dangerous skill that they carefully hid when brought to the Caldwell estate. Their secret was discovered, however, one evening in the fall of 1846, when Catherine Caldwell found Samuel reading an old newspaper in the stables. Instead of reporting him, Catherine began meeting him in secret. Her diary, found in 1964 during the demolition of the old house, shows entries that grew stranger around that time, filled with hints like "our shared truth" and "C&S understand." At the same time, records show Samuel was moved from the fields to work in the stables, which kept him close to the main house. While no document directly confirms it, local stories suggest Elizabeth also formed a bond with Elijah, who cared for the plantation's large gardens. The symmetry of these two relationships, twin sisters drawn to two enslaved men, created a disturbing pattern that one old newspaper later described as a mirrored tale of forbidden love. The winter of 1846 and 1847 was especially cold in Georgia, with freezing winds that ruined crops and left the plantation isolated. During that lonely winter, the secret relationships deepened. A letter from Thomas Caldwell to his brother in Charleston, dated January 23, 1847, mentioned a strange sadness in Elizabeth and an odd energy in Catherine. He wrote, "I fear this long winter has affected them in opposite ways." But what Thomas did not realize was that his daughters were not merely restless, they were living a dangerous secret that defied every law and custom of their time. If discovered, the outcome would have been disastrous for everyone involved. The first solid proof of their secret affair appeared in coded notes found pressed inside a book of poetry that belonged to Elizabeth. These scraps of paper, dated through February 1847, contained plans for secret meetings and words of affection. One note read, "The usual place at midnight. The new moon hides us. C and S will join. 4 hearts beat as 2. It was now clear that the twins knew of each other's secret and were even working together. They used their identical looks to confuse anyone who might suspect them. Everything changed on March 15, 1847, when Thomas Caldwell announced at dinner that he had arranged marriages for both daughters to the sons of rich plantation owners in nearby counties. Catherine wrote that she smiled politely while her heart turned to stone. Elizabeth's reaction is not known, but the events that followed make her feelings obvious. 3 nights later, in the early hours of March 18th, the plantation's overseer, James Whitaker, woke to strange noises. Investigating, he found a fire in one of the storage sheds near the slave quarters. The blaze was put out quickly, but what it revealed was far worse. Samuel, Elijah, and the Caldwell twins were missing. A search began immediately, spreading to nearby farms and along every road leading away from the property. Whitaker wrote that the assumption was clear. The enslaved men had escaped and, in a shocking act, taken the Caldwell daughters with them. Rewards were offered, and what followed became one of the largest manhunts in the county's history. Thomas Caldwell, consumed by worry and anger, barely slept or ate. What no one knew then was that the fire had been set on purpose by Elizabeth as a distraction. This detail came out in 1868, when a former servant named Ruth told a northern journalist that Elizabeth had warned her earlier that night to stay quiet about what she knew. The search lasted for weeks, stretching into neighboring counties and even across state lines. By April, Thomas's health had collapsed. Plantation documents show he was bedridden, visited by a doctor from Augusta, and cared for only by his longtime servant. On May 2nd, a letter arrived that changed everything. No full record of its contents exists, but after reading it, Thomas flew into a rage, then collapsed. He died 3 days later. The doctor listed the cause as apoplexy, what we would now call a stroke. After his death, control of the estate passed to his brother Edward Caldwell, who came from Charleston to settle the affairs. While sorting through Thomas's private study, Edward found a small wooden box. Inside were hand-drawn marriage certificates showing that Elizabeth had married Elijah and Catherine had married Samuel on the night of March 17, 1847. Alongside them was a letter written by Catherine explaining that she and her sister had fallen in love with the men and, knowing their father would never allow it, had planned their escape north to live freely. She wrote that they had saved small items for months and prepared for their journey, seeking the only happiness we have ever known. Edward, shocked, hid everything. He returned the papers to the box and locked them away. To the public, he told a different story, that the twins had been kidnapped and likely killed by runaways. The official version stuck for nearly 20 years. But in 1865, after the Civil War, a woman arrived at the decaying Caldwell estate. She introduced herself as Margaret Johnson, but her resemblance to the Caldwell twins was unmistakable. She asked to see Edward, and they met for several hours. When she left, he was pale and shaken. Within months, he sold the plantation and moved back to Charleston, living quietly until his death in 1871. The truth came to light only in 1958, when a collection of letters donated to the Georgia Historical Society included one written by Edward to his wife the day after that meeting. In it, he revealed that Margaret Johnson was Catherine Caldwell. She had returned to Georgia to collect her mother's belongings and to tell her uncle the truth, that she, Elizabeth, and the two men had escaped together. They had reached Philadelphia, helped by abolitionists who gave them new names and shelter. Elizabeth and Elijah moved to Boston, where Elijah became a carpenter. Samuel opened a small livery stable, and Catherine worked as a seamstress. Both couples had children who grew up unaware of their true heritage. Catherine had come back not for money, but to set the story right, to prove that she and her sister had not been victims, but women who had chosen love and freedom over privilege. Edward, however, refused. In his letter, he wrote that revealing the truth would bring shame too heavy to bear upon our name and the memory of my brother. He gave her money and made her promise never to return to Georgia, and with that, the real story of the Caldwell twins was buried once more beneath the weight of silence and time. Whether Catherine accepted this offer is not mentioned in Edward's letter, but history tells us that Margaret Johnson bought a ticket to Philadelphia the very next day and never returned to Georgia. The Caldwell family kept their version of events alive, the story of a tragic abduction and the supposed death of the twins. In 1883, a fire destroyed much of the Wilks County courthouse, taking with it many records from the antebellum era. That loss made the truth of the Caldwell story even harder to uncover. By the early 1900s, what had once been a family tragedy had turned into a local legend filled with exaggerations and ghostly tales added to what was originally a deeply human story of love, fear, and defiance. It was not until 1964, when the old Caldwell plantation house was being torn down, that a hidden discovery changed everything. Inside a secret compartment built into what had once been Catherine's bedroom wall, workers found her diary. The small book covered the period from January 1846 to March 1847 and became the first first-hand account from someone directly involved in the events. Catherine's diary revealed a detailed and emotional view of the relationships between the twins and the enslaved men. She wrote of her surprise at finding out Samuel could read and write, which grew into curiosity, admiration, and finally love. Her diary spoke of their long talks about faith, philosophy, and freedom, discussions that changed how she saw herself and the world. One of her most moving reflections was written on November 12, 1846. I have been blind, not only to the pain around me, but to the truth of what it means to be human. S has opened my eyes, and though the light hurts, I cannot close them again. The diary also showed that both sisters knew of and supported each other's secret relationships. Catherine wrote about their late-night talks, shared fears, and their plan to run away. The final entry on March 16, 1847 reads simply, "Tomorrow we leave everything behind for an uncertain future. We may find freedom or death, but either is better than living a lie." When historians uncovered the diary, it reignited interest in the story. Research during the 1960s revealed new clues, including ship records showing that 4 people under the names Johnson and Davis had booked passage from Savannah to Philadelphia in March 1847. Census data from 1850 confirmed that Samuel and Catherine Johnson, listed as mulatto, lived in Philadelphia with 2 children. Likewise, Boston records listed an Elijah and Elizabeth Davis, also mulatto, living with 1 child. Then, in 1968, a breakthrough came when a descendant of Elizabeth and Elijah Davis, a professor from a New England university, came forward with letters written by the twins throughout the 1850s and 1860s. The letters described lives built from sacrifice yet filled with purpose. The sisters wrote about their children, their teaching work, their growing knowledge, and their involvement in the abolition movement. They also expressed fear after the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which made life for former slaves and their allies more dangerous. In one letter dated July 4, 1865, Catherine reflected, today is not only this nation's independence, but finally our own. For 18 years, we have lived in the shadows, always cautious. Now, though the road ahead is uncertain, we may finally step into the light. I like to think that Father, freed from this world, might now understand why we did what we did. By 1969, enough proof had emerged to rewrite what historians called the Caldwell twins incident. What had been told as a story of abduction and death was actually one of courage and defiance. Two young women had turned away from wealth and family privilege to follow love and conscience. Their descendants, now living across northern states, mostly chose to keep their heritage private. The few who spoke with researchers during the 1970s revealed families that had grown up hearing edited versions of the truth, stories that described their great-grandmothers as northern women married to men of mixed race. The real truth, that they were daughters of a Georgia slave owner who had fallen in love with enslaved men and escaped north, was often hidden until adulthood. Some descendants expressed deep pride in their ancestors' bravery. Others admitted to struggling with the complicated legacy of both slave ownership and rebellion against it. The plantation itself no longer exists. The land has been divided and developed. A small historical marker, placed in 1972 near where the main house once stood, simply notes the Caldwell family estate with no mention of the twins or their escape. Over the years, local opinion has shifted, from denial and disbelief to a more thoughtful acknowledgement of its importance. Historians now recognize it as a rare and powerful example of Southern women rejecting the very system that raised them. The Caldwell story remains significant because it challenges the easy versions of antebellum history. It reminds us that even those who lived within unjust systems could awaken morally and act with great courage. It shows how love and understanding could sometimes cross barriers of race and status, even at terrible risk. Catherine wrote in her diary, "We did not choose to be born into this world of masters and slaves, but we can choose whether to accept it." Their decision left behind a legacy that still resonates, a reminder that in dark times, individual conscience can shine brightest. Perhaps the most haunting part of their story is how successfully the truth was hidden afterward, replaced by a safer, false version. It reminds us of how many other stories like theirs may have been lost, acts of quiet rebellion that history forgot. Today, what we know of Elizabeth, Catherine, Samuel, and Elijah comes from fragments, letters, diary pages, and scattered records that list where they lived, but not what they dreamed. We can only imagine the courage it took to leave everything behind for the fragile promise of freedom. The plantation house is long gone, and the fields where Samuel and Elijah once worked have been changed beyond recognition. What remains is their story, living not in monuments, but in memory. A whisper from the past that still asks us to face the truth about the world they escaped. As for the wooden box that once held their secret marriage certificates, the physical proof of their vows, it has never been found. Some say Edward Caldwell destroyed it before his death, unable to bear what it meant. Others believe it still lies hidden somewhere, waiting to be uncovered like the truth itself. The search for that truth continues, not only for historians, but for everyone trying to understand the complicated past we share. The story of the Caldwell twins stands as a testament that history is not only about laws or wars, but also about hearts, choices, and acts of courage that quietly reshaped the world. Then, in 1966, yet another discovery deepened the story. A small leather-bound journal was found inside a secret drawer of an antique desk sold at an estate sale in Philadelphia. Water-damaged but mostly readable, it belonged to Samuel Johnson, once Samuel of Caldwell Plantation. His entries from 1848 to 1859 revealed new details of their escape and life afterward. He described months of preparation, collecting supplies, studying maps, and learning the routes of the Underground Railroad. He recounted their dangerous 6-week journey north, moving only at night and relying on kind strangers who risked everything to help. In one entry dated April 2, 1847, Samuel recalled, "Today, disaster nearly found us. A patrol stopped our wagon while we hid beneath sacks of grain. Elizabeth spoke with such calm courage, claiming to be visiting family nearby. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. We waited for what felt like hours after they left before we dared to breathe again." Samuel's words also revealed his deep emotions, the guilt of leaving loved ones behind in bondage, the confusion of freedom, and the constant fear of being discovered. He wrote tenderly about Catherine, describing how she sometimes missed the comforts of her old life, but never wavered in her commitment. "There are days," he wrote in 1852, "when I see her watching fine-dressed women pass our window, and I wonder if she regrets. But then she looks at me, and I see in her eyes the same resolve that brought her here." The journal also confirmed that contact with Georgia had not completely ended. Catherine exchanged letters with Margaret Sullivan, the former housekeeper who had once written about the twins' strange behavior. Margaret, living in Richmond after Thomas Caldwell's death, quietly informed Catherine about her family. It was this exchange that led to Catherine's decision to return briefly to Georgia in 1865 against Samuel's wishes. When she came back, Samuel noted that she seemed burdened by sorrow. She learned that her father died believing she had been taken. "It troubles her deeply, and I cannot ease her heart." In 1967, researchers uncovered church records from a small African Methodist Episcopal church in Philadelphia that documented the baptisms of the Johnson and Davis children. Each sister stood as godmother for the other's child, a sign of their continued closeness. These documents also showed how often they moved, likely to stay ahead of danger after the Fugitive Slave Act. By 1855, Samuel had built a modest but stable business running a livery service in Philadelphia, allowing his family to buy a small home. Elijah and Elizabeth had by then moved to western Massachusetts, beginning a quieter life on a small farm. Through every discovery, the diaries, letters, and records, the truth of the Caldwell twins grew clearer. It is a story of love, defiance, and the cost of freedom. And though the people are long gone, their courage continues to echo through time, a reminder that even when truth is buried, it waits patiently to be found. Local records show that Elijah worked as a carpenter and cabinet maker, while Elizabeth helped support their household by teaching local children how to read and do basic arithmetic. Their quiet life in the countryside may have provided them with a layer of safety, keeping them somewhat away from the judgment and attention they might have faced in a larger city. One of the most interesting discoveries came in 1968 when a researcher reviewing documents from abolitionist groups found that Katherine Johnson and Elizabeth Davis were contributors to several anti-slavery newspapers. Using pen names, the sisters wrote a series of anonymous letters exposing the moral decay of slavery from the viewpoint of those who had grown up surrounded by it. These letters, printed in The Liberator and other abolitionist papers between 1852 and 1858, never revealed who the authors truly were or the details of their lives, but their words spoke deeply about the psychological harm caused by slavery, not only to those enslaved, but also to those who owned them. In one letter, believed to be Elizabeth's, the writer described slavery as a poison that ruins the master's soul as surely as it breaks the body of the enslaved, a system that destroys any chance for true human connection across its false divides. The Civil War brought both hardship and hope for the families. Samuel's diary entries from 1861 to 1865 reveal his mixed emotions about the conflict's possible outcomes. He wrote about sending money to aid the Union, attending community meetings where battlefield news was shared, and the collective fear about what a Confederate victory might mean for free black people in the North. A particularly touching entry from January 1863, after the Emancipation Proclamation, reads, "Today marks the beginning of what we have dreamed of for so long." He noted that while the proclamation's effects might be limited, its moral meaning was immense. For the first time, the nation had officially declared what they had always believed, that no man should own another. "E and I celebrated quietly," he wrote, "unable to find words for what this day means to us, who have lived both sides of this terrible divide. Life after the war brought some sense of safety as the end of slavery removed their greatest danger. Still, census data and other records from that period suggest that they continued to live cautiously, never fully revealing their past, even though the threat of being re-enslaved had faded." In 1873, tragedy struck when Samuel Johnson died suddenly of pneumonia at about 50 years old. His death certificate in Philadelphia City Archives listed him simply as a business owner, identified as colored, with no mention of his remarkable history. Catherine never remarried. City records show she continued to run the livery business with her oldest son's help until 1881, when she sold it and moved to her daughter's home in upstate New York. She passed away there in 1890 at around 65 years of age. Elizabeth lived nearly 10 more years, dying in 1900 at her Massachusetts farm surrounded by family. According to letters kept by her descendants, she sometimes told her grandchildren stories about her youth in Georgia, though she always left out the most dangerous details about her escape and new life. One of the most treasured family documents is a letter Elizabeth wrote to her granddaughter for her 18th birthday in 1895. Preserved and later donated to the Massachusetts Historical Society, the letter shares advice shaped by her extraordinary life. "My dearest girl, as you stand at the threshold of womanhood, I wish to share the greatest lesson I have learned. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the resolve to act despite it. You will face moments when you must choose between what is easy and what is right. In those moments, remember, the hardest path often leads to the truest freedom. I have known both captivity and liberty, though not as you might imagine, and I can tell you that no comfort is worth the loss of one's soul." Many parts of the Caldwell twins' story remain frustratingly incomplete. No photos of the sisters have been found, though a daguerreotype believed to show Samuel and Catherine's eldest son, taken around 1870 in Philadelphia, is housed at the Georgia Historical Society. The young man's features strongly resemble written descriptions of Thomas Caldwell, a striking reminder of his complex heritage. In 1969, an archaeological dig at the site of the old Caldwell plantation revealed the remains of slave quarters and several artifacts, including a small wooden bird that Catherine's diary says was a gift from Samuel. This simple carving now sits in a museum, a quiet symbol of a love that crossed forbidden lines. The story of the Caldwell twins has since inspired academic essays, novels, and even a play. Yet it remains little known beyond historians. Perhaps this is because it complicates neat ideas about the Old South, challenging both the myth of the gentle plantation life and the North's self-image as purely righteous. What makes the Caldwell story truly remarkable is not just that it involved interracial love, something more common than records admit, but that two white Southern women chose to defy every expectation of their world, giving up privilege to stand beside the men they loved. In a 1968 oral history interview, a great-granddaughter of Elizabeth and Elijah Davis reflected, "When I think about what they risked, not just comfort, but their lives, for love and for what they believed was right, it humbles me. They had the courage to look at the world they were born into and say, 'No, this is wrong and I will not be part of it,' even when that decision cost them nearly everything. The Caldwell twins story now exists between recorded history and legend. We know that Elizabeth and Catherine Caldwell vanished from their father's plantation in March 1847, along with 2 enslaved men, that they reappeared in the North with new names and families, and that Catherine returned briefly to Georgia after the war. The rest survives only in scattered diary pages, half-lost letters, and fading memories passed down through generations. Like many stories of resistance, especially those led by women, the full truth was blurred by time, secrecy, and a history that often ignored those who dared to defy norms. In 2002, another remarkable discovery added to their tale. During renovations of an old boarding house in Philadelphia once used by Underground Railroad fugitives, workers uncovered a hidden cavity inside a chimney. Inside lay a small cloth pouch holding a gold locket with 2 miniature portraits believed to be the Caldwell twins, along with a paper labeled Elizabeth and Catherine, Georgia, 1844. Experts think the locket was hidden by Catherine before returning south in 1865, perhaps as protection in case she never came back. The portraits show 2 serious young women with identical faces dressed like Southern belles of the 1840s, unaware that just a few years later they would abandon that world for another life entirely. Today, descendants of Samuel and Elijah's families live across the United States. Some are unaware of their connection to this powerful story. Others speak of the moral courage it represents and of the uneasy truth that the twins were both products of and rebels against a deeply unjust system. The Caldwell plantation is long gone, replaced by suburban houses. A small, weathered historical marker offers no hint of the extraordinary human story that once unfolded there. Maybe that quietness is fitting. The Caldwell's story, at its heart, is about unseen connections, about quiet acts of rebellion, and the courage to imagine a different kind of life. In her final diary entry before escaping, Catherine Caldwell wrote, "Tomorrow we step into darkness, not knowing if we will find light on the other side. But even the darkness of uncertainty is better than the false brightness of a life built on others' suffering." That choice, made on a March night in 1847 by 2 young women and 2 enslaved men, continues to echo through time, a lasting reminder of conscience, love, and moral awakening. Though time has softened their voices, the echo remains. It challenges us to reflect on our own choices, our own courage, and our willingness to act for justice. Perhaps the Caldwell twins' story is not just about the past at all, but about the present and the future, the boundaries we break, the values we uphold, and the kind of world we create. Their legacy lives not in statues or stones, but in every act of courage that chooses truth over comfort. And so, their story ends where it began, with 4 people walking into the night, leaving behind everything they knew for a chance at freedom. We know they found that freedom, imperfect though it was. What we can never fully know is the strength it took to take that first step, to abandon the only world they had ever known for a future uncertain but true. That single moment of choice is the heartbeat of their story, a question that still lingers for us today. What are we willing to risk for love, for justice, for the freedom to live as our souls demand?